Hey guys, it's Celestia, and TikTok terrifies me. I don't mean to be overdramatic, but I really mean it wholeheartedly and without exaggeration, now more than ever. A while back, I made a video discussing why the TikTok art community is so toxic. I went over a lot of different things, from how unsolicited criticism is the norm, to the widespread acceptance and normalization of leaving vitriolic hate comments on any artist's work, especially beginners, to the increasing inability of users to view artists as human beings rather than pieces of content to be harshly reviewed and then scrolled past. It's linked in the icon above if you're interested in hearing more about that. But long story short, I've always had a lot of reasons for very vocally expressing my distaste for the platform and its impact on artists, and this is far from the first time I've done so. But that video was almost entirely about how the social and community-based aspects of TikTok hurt artists, and while that harm is significant and worth considering in and of itself, it didn't scare me. It made me critical, enough so that I felt it important to make a video expressing those criticisms in an effort to warn others about those aspects and open a discussion surrounding why they're so prolific, and it definitely made me wary of the platform as a whole and very hesitant to use it myself, much less encourage others to, but it didn't scare me. It does now, and it's not because it's toxic. It's not because of the relentless bullying of anyone whose art is deemed subpar by enough people. It's not because of the constant drama. It's not because of the unsolicited critique, or any of the other social problems plaguing its art community that I've already said my piece on. It's because the way it's changing our brains is, in my opinion, threatening the future of art to an unprecedented, exceedingly under-discussed degree. And it seems like no one is noticing. TikTok brain, or brainrot, is not a new concept to anyone who spends any significant amount of time online. The way constant, excessive use of the app is impacting its users' brains has been the topic of almost universal discussion for quite a while now, and for good reason. The extremely addictive nature that the platform was deliberately designed to have is one that we're just now beginning to notice the consequences of, with more and more studies coming out that suggest increasingly concerning ramifications of its long-term use. It's still so new that none of them are able to conclusively assess the full extent of them yet, but even if it's still in its early stages of research and coverage, it's an issue that's being taken very seriously by both the medical community and TikTok's own user base, and rightfully so. TikTok brainrot is terrifying, and it's happening so fast. People are spending hours upon hours a day scrolling through video after video, and as their usage increases in frequency and duration, so too do the increasingly worrying symptoms they've begun to report. Users have come out in droves sharing their experiences with it, explaining that they're no longer able to focus on anything for longer than a few minutes at most, that they're dealing with near constant brain fog, that they're bored of anything that doesn't give them the same instant gratification that TikTok does, and that their focus, memory, and attention span have all deteriorated so much that they're struggling with everyday tasks that were never a problem for them before. And as scary as that is, it's not under-discussed. There are hundreds of articles, videos, studies, papers, and even mainstream news segments devoted solely and consistently to the discussion and investigation of this issue, to the point that terms like TikTok use disorder are being used in research papers shared by actual medical professionals on PubMed. And TikTok brain is becoming an accepted, well-known term that everyone knows, and many jokingly and flippantly cite as the totally inconsequential reason they're no longer able to neurologically function how they used to, as if that's funny. I am far from the first person to express sincere fear of how this phenomenon will continue to develop in a general neurological sense. And while I will be discussing what we know about those impacts on a physiological level so far, for the sake of clarity, it's a topic that's had such widespread coverage that I don't think there's much to be gained from me contributing my own. I'll link some videos that I think do a wonderful job of that in the description if you want to check those out instead. But while the effect that TikTok is having on our brains in general is being actively and thoroughly discussed in just about every kind of media there is, what I see very few people acknowledging is how that effect threatens not just artists, but art itself. Obviously, that's less concerning than how it affects actual human beings and their physical and mental well-being. So I'm not saying it's unreasonable that it's comparatively under-discussed. It goes without saying that that should be the focus, because health is ultimately more important than art. And I don't want to take away from that at all by bringing attention to the art side of this. I just want to share the observations that I've made about the art side and how it's being impacted so that more discussion can be had about it, or at least more thought be given about it. The future of art is not as important as the future of humanity, but it is still important, especially to me. And I am genuinely afraid of how TikTok might threaten both. So while I've already discussed how TikTok's community hurts artists on a social level, I think it's even more important to now discuss how the way it's changing our brains is hurting artists on a physical level. Because from everything I've seen, heard, studied, and read, TikTok might gradually be killing both our ability to learn art and our ability to be creative at all, if we let it anyway. But before we start getting into what will likely be a pretty heavy video, I'd like to take a much more lighthearted moment to thank its sponsor, Factor. I am an incredibly busy person, and I follow a very strict schedule in order to get everything that I need to get done in a day done on time. And that strict schedule almost never includes time for cooking. When there are a million things that need doing, making my own meals is usually the lowest priority that gets pushed to the bottom of my to-do list, especially when that also means taking even more time to go shopping for ingredients and preparing them and cleaning up after. And I'm sure a lot of you are just as busy and in the exact same boat, which makes cooking and even eating feel stressful rather than rewarding. But Factor takes all of that stress away, delivering fresh, delicious, never frozen meals right to your door. You can choose from an extensive menu of 35 chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals, which even accommodate whatever your dietary needs may be, by offering options like Calorie Smart, Keto, Protein Plus, or Vegan and Veggie. They turn cooking from a time-consuming hassle into an easy, enjoyable part of your day to look forward to. So no matter what your schedule is like, you'll have a hot, fresh dinner waiting for you that's ready in just 2 minutes. No more grocery stores, prep work, cleanup, or cooking fatigue. Factor just makes food fun again. And with the excellent deal they're offering today, you can find that out for yourself. Get 50% off and free shipping on your first Factor box using my link. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code with your phone. Not only are you getting an amazing solution to all of your cooking needs, but every purchase directly supports the channel and helps me bring you more content like this. So it's a win-win, and a really delicious win-win too. Thank you so much to Factor for sponsoring today's video, and please go check them out via the link in the description or the QR code on screen. Alright, now let's talk about TikTok. More specifically, let's talk about TikTok Brainrot, which is not a medical term by any means, nor is it a particularly eloquent or professional one, but it is the one that almost everyone uses, and since the phenomenon is so widespread that almost everyone is talking about it, the term they're using may as well be the official one at this point regardless. It refers to the neurological changes in the brain experienced by people who very frequently use TikTok, the most common of which includes severely reduced attention span, inability to focus, memory loss, depression, and anxiety. Now, for the sake of transparency, I want to make it clear right off the bat that the link between excessive use of TikTok and these symptoms hasn't been proven. A multitude of studies have been done into it, but while the vast majority of the results do strongly suggest that TikTok use is very likely to be the primary cause, those results haven't been conclusive enough to say that it is with complete certainty. I read a lot of them while researching this video, and I will say that while maybe 90% of the ones that I found present strong evidence supporting the theory that TikTok is directly responsible for these symptoms, the other 10% do present contradictory results that cast doubt on that theory, or at least suggest that there may be other contributing factors. They're all linked in the description if you'd like to check them out yourself, and honestly, I strongly recommend that you do. And while I personally find the evidence suggesting that TikTok is to blame for this phenomenon much more compelling and likely than the evidence suggesting that it isn't, I still think it's important to disclose that that is just my opinion, and we don't know for sure, at least not yet. And that's not exactly surprising, in fairness, as the role of attention in learning in the digital age, one of the articles I consulted puts it, there is a substantial lag between the introduction of new technologies and the publication and dissemination of research about the implications of using the technology. Tech is advancing so quickly that we quite simply don't have the time to thoroughly research what consequences its regular use could have on humanity before it advances even further and we're back to square one. We know so little about what any kind of technology does to our brains if we use it enough, but the research into what TikTok in particular does, even compared to other social media platforms, is uniquely alarming. Dopamine, as most of you probably already know, is a feel-good hormone released by the brain in response to pleasurable experiences. It's what makes us happy when Mike Flanagan releases a new Netflix show, or we risk salmonella to eat cookie dough because, quite frankly, it's worth it. It's what Aaron Hansen eloquently refers to as the good brain juice. And naturally, it's addictive. Obviously, we want our brains to give us the thing that makes us feel good, and obviously we're gonna do whatever we can to make it do just that. In moderation, that's not a problem. Hell, it's the opposite of a problem. I love the dopamine rush my brain gives me after a long day of work when I pick up my Switch and play Pokemon, and it makes the long day of work worth it because it's a reward. The problem arises when it's not a reward for anything, when you're seeking it every second of every day and you can constantly get it without needing to do anything to earn it. It starts becoming an addiction that's far more destructive than helpful. And I'm sure you can guess where I'm going with this. TikTok turns the release of dopamine from a comforting reward into a constant necessity, in a manner that's shockingly similar to gambling addiction. And to be clear, it's not because using TikTok gives you dopamine. Using any app or site that you enjoy will likely give you dopamine to some degree, and that's not inherently bad in and of itself. The problem is that TikTok gives you constant spikes of dopamine in rapid succession with incredibly short-form content that's immediately attention-grabbing, because it has to be. As of 2023, the ideal optimal length of a TikTok video is between 24 and 31 seconds, so any information or entertainment each one contains needs to get viewers' attention as quickly as humanly possible within that time frame, so that they don't just scroll to the next one. And once you've gotten a spike of dopamine from watching one 30-second video you really liked, there are hundreds more just a flick of your finger away, with no effort required on your part to actually seek them out and find them. The algorithm's already created the perfect For You page based on your preferences, offering instant gratification to every regular user and eliminating the need to find the content that you enjoy before enjoying it. The dopamine you get isn't a reward for seeking out and finding something that brings you joy or entertainment. It's just a constant given that's automatically delivered the moment you open the app. And if you're getting getting a dopamine spike every minute or so just by scrolling TikTok without needing to put any effort into getting those spikes, it's very quickly going to make all of the other ways you used to get them feel redundant. Why spend 5 minutes searching for a YouTube video or a Netflix series that interests you and another half hour consuming that content to feel good when you can just open TikTok and feel good immediately? Why read a book or play an instrument or go for a walk to get dopamine when all of that requires time and effort and you could get it way more easily by scrolling through your For You page for hours? It makes sense that that's dangerously addictive, especially when so many awful things are happening in the world and we're all so desperate for something to make handling them easier. But the problem with TikTok isn't just that it's giving constant dopamine rushes to users with no effort required on their part to get them, and getting them addicted in the process. It's that it's giving them those rushes in rapid succession. Most videos are only half a minute long, meaning the immersion in and entertainment derived from each one begins and ends incredibly quickly before your attention is immediately shifted to the next. You don't even need to pay attention to one thing for a full minute before you get the neurological reward for it in the form of dopamine-fueled pleasure. So why bother paying attention to anything longer than that if you don't have to? And that convenience is dangerous because it gradually stops being a matter of preference. Over time, many go from thinking, I'd rather watch short videos than do other enjoyable things that take longer, to I'm so used to experiencing that enjoyment within 30 seconds that I can't get it from anything that takes longer. So many people who have used TikTok regularly and excessively say that even other social media platforms are no longer engaging enough to hold their attention, much less anything like hobbies or education. They're slow, they're boring, there's too much scrolling and searching to find something they're interested in that gives them the good brain juice, and it's just not engaging enough. And 50% of users admitted that they find videos over a minute long stressful. Not just boring, stressful. The idea of paying attention to one video for a full minute, even on TikTok, is anxiety-inducing. And while the terms TikTok brain and even TikTok use disorder aren't ones that are conclusively rooted in medical fact, there's more than enough research to suggest that addiction, constant multitasking, and lack of attention required for stimulation is having an effect on not just our mental health, but our physical health. One study from 2018 showed that visible atrophy took place in the frontal cortex of the brains of children between the ages of 9 and 10 that used smartphones for more than 7 hours a day. And while that sounds like way more time than anyone would ever spend on TikTok per day, there's no shortage of people that come very close. People spend more time daily on TikTok than any other social media platform, and everything about its algorithm is designed to increase that time more and more with every passing day. Another study in 2021 concluded that, at least based on their results, excessive usage of TikTok was directly linked to memory loss, stress, anxiety, and sadness. Yet another study found that people who very frequently multitask, which is exactly what every user of TikTok is essentially always doing, have a diminished ability to maintain focus and are much more easily distracted, severely impacting their ability to concentrate on anything that requires any degree of uninterrupted focus. And that's just the research. Looking online for just a few minutes will show you hundreds, if not thousands, of first-hand accounts of people experiencing just that. People are coming out in droves to say that they're struggling with basic memory and focus to an unprecedented degree, dealing with brain fog when not constantly stimulated, and finding it impossible to complete even basic tasks that require them to pay them their full and undivided attention for an extended period of time. We may not have conclusive proof that TikTok is to blame for that, but we certainly have enough evidence, both via research and the accounts of those who are actively dealing with it themselves, to suggest that it's incredibly likely that it is. There's a lot more to it than that, because it's a much wider reaching and intricate issue than I've explained so far. Like I said, there are other videos going into more detail linked in the description. And honestly, I've probably bored quite a few of you already with the minimal detail I've already gone into. And I'm sorry, but I needed to in order to properly explain how all of this compounds into such a massive threat to the future of art and artists alike. Because our ability to both learn and be creative are dependent on all of the things that TikTok is actively impairing. When it comes to learning, the problem is pretty obvious. You can't learn if you can't pay attention, and TikTok is diminishing its users' ability to an alarming degree. In my previous video about the problems with TikTok, I brought up my concerns with the platform's incredibly short-form format when it came to educational content, explaining that in many cases of artists sharing advice or tutorials there, the very limited amount of time that they have to explain that advice often leads to it being underexplained and oversimplified. Within 30 seconds, you may be able to show someone an art hack that makes their color palette pop more, or shows them how to draw hands faster, but you don't have time to explain the color theory that makes the art hack effective at enhancing their palette, or the basics of anatomy that are being simplified with the hand tutorial. Half-explained advice is being given that doesn't teach anyone why things work the way they do in art, but only how to achieve a certain outcome in a certain setting with a certain technique. And I went into the problems that arise from that more in the other video. So I won't go into more detail here in the interest of saving time, because while it's important, it's not necessarily relevant to the point I'm making here. And the point I'm making here isn't just that short-form content isn't, in my opinion, an effective way to teach or learn art, and that using it as one anyway frequently leads to misinformation and a lack of understanding. My point is that as TikTok continues to reshape its users' brains and diminish their ability to pay attention to anything longer than that short-form content, it's quickly becoming the only art education that they're able to learn from. That may sound like an exaggeration, but I've spoken to more people than I can count at this point who have openly said that they're quite simply not able to watch a video for longer than 5 minutes. So they've switched exclusively to TikTok as their sole provider of educational art content, because it's always under that 5-minute limit. So not only is the short-form format limiting the usefulness and accuracy of the art advice shared there, that advice is quickly becoming the only advice that young artists are still able to learn from. And if you're just drawing for fun and aren't interested in learning or improving, TikTok art advice is fine. If it teaches you how to draw something you want to draw in the way you want to draw it, and that makes you happy, then far be it from me to say that you shouldn't use it just because it doesn't teach you anything else. For hobbyists with no interest in art education beyond what they need to know to draw the things they like, the inability to focus on or learn from anything other than art TikTok probably doesn't do them much harm, if any. But for artists who do sincerely want to grow and improve and develop their skills, it does. There's only so much you can learn about art if you're not able to listen to explanations of the fundamentals that comprise it. There's a limit to how much you can improve when all you're learning from is bite-sized pieces of information delivered to you at random intervals by an algorithm, especially when that algorithm also appears to be hindering your short-term memory and ability to retain information. There are aspects of art that require dedicated, focused, consistent study to learn properly and thoroughly, and that is quite simply not possible if the prolonged use of this platform is rendering you unable to give your studies that focus. And again, if you don't want to learn the fundamentals or expand your understanding of art beyond what you need to know to draw what you want, that's probably not a problem for you. But what worries me deeply is the number of artists that I've seen saying they want to learn the fundamentals, they want to study art, but not only can they not pay attention to the long-form content that explains it, they've gotten so addicted to the instant gratification that TikTok provides that they find learning and practicing those skills unbearably boring compared to the immediate pleasure that comes from just drawing for fun instead, to the point that they can't bring themselves to do it at all. TikTok is constantly providing dopamine spikes with no effort, and that gradually appears to be making people so dependent on the constant and effortless production of dopamine that without it, they're unable to concentrate at all. And focused, dedicated, consistent study doesn't involve a lot of dopamine spikes. In fact, especially in the beginning stages, it involves almost none. Practicing what you need to learn to improve means sucking at it first, so you don't get the dopamine reward of making something you're proud of after. Even if you should be proud of the progress you made, it's just not the same as that feeling of pride and satisfaction that comes from making art that you like and think is good. And the latter does generally give you a lot more dopamine than the former. Both practicing and studying art involve a lot of work with very few rewards at first, even if there are many over time. It means doing a lot of stuff you hate so you can eventually do the stuff you love. And that's pretty much exactly the opposite of the instant gratification that TikTok has made so many artists dependent on. And it would be one thing if that was limited to TikTok, if they only needed instant gratification while using the platform but didn't depend on it in any other area of their lives. I don't imagine it would hold them back from growing as artists. But more and more research suggests that the constant exposure to that instant gratification on TikTok is influencing not just behavior, but physiology, just like any real addiction. And if it's affecting our brains and not just our preferences, that effect isn't going to be limited to TikTok anymore. Something that's made abundantly clear by the number of frustrated artists desperately trying to learn and improve, but failing to because they physically cannot pay attention to things that aren't immediately engaging or fun or rewarding anymore. If you're constantly getting a reward, you're gonna lose both your willingness and ability to earn those rewards by doing the tedious but necessary tasks that you once needed to complete in order to do so. That's what scares me so much about how TikTok is impacting the future of art education. But that's not the only thing I'm scared of. Like I said in the beginning, TikTok brain isn't just hurting our ability to learn art, but our ability to be creative altogether. And that's because of something that's widely viewed as a good thing. It cures boredom. It's something I've heard more times than I can count as a victory to be celebrated. TikTok has cured boredom. And every time I hear it, that statement scares me more, because there's nothing more important for creativity than boredom. It's necessary. I understand why it's seen as a good thing that TikTok is putting an end to being disinterested and unengaged. It's exceptionally and fundamentally human to want to avoid boredom. We're constantly looking for ways to escape it, because too much of it ultimately makes living unbearably dull and pointless. But it's that search for an escape from it that leads to innovation and imagination as we work to find more and more new ways to stimulate our brains and give us dopamine. And the search for new ways not to be bored is what's led to the development of sports, media, games, stories, and so much more. So if that boredom is being quote-unquote cured, and it was the only thing motivating us to create those things and have new ideas, the need to innovate disappears. Creativity is no longer necessary if stimulation is guaranteed without it. While the vast majority of people view boredom as a bad thing, there is so much research out there suggesting that it's anything but. Yes, we dislike being bored, and the experience of it is absolutely negative, but our desire to leave that understimulated state is an opportunity full of nothing but positive potential. If we were never bored, we would never think of ways not to be, and the ways that we've thought of not to be so far have been some of life's most valuable pleasures. When I'm bored after work and I play Pokemon to have fun, it's only because someone else was bored once and came up with the world of Pokemon as a way to escape it themselves. It motivates and pushes us to think and create, incentivizing us by making life dull as hell without that thought and creation. And not only does boredom prompt us to innovate and create to escape it, it's scientifically proven to be one of the biggest boosts to creative thinking that there is. When our minds are idle, they're free to wander to whatever they choose without direction, making unexpected connections and filling the silence of our thoughts with ideas that we might never have considered if we were focused on something in particular. If you're really immersed in a book you're reading, you're usually a lot less likely to have the random thoughts and ideas that could inspire you to write your own. You may find ideas for your own within that book, but your mind is being actively guided by its narrative first and foremost. So if you want to come up with your own ideas altogether, it's much more difficult to because you're immersed in someone else's. Giving your mind direction is so useful for focus and productivity, but not making any time to give it the freedom to wander without direction is limiting. The time we spend walking to work or taking the bus and bored as hell by the tedium of it is actually the time in which we're most likely to have new, wonderful ideas. And while it's not fun, it leads to fun. And if we're filling all of those empty spaces and dull moments with stimulation from TikTok rather than our own thoughts, and depriving ourselves of our most creative state of being, I can't help but be afraid that new ideas and concepts that could be turned into the most beautiful pieces of art will just gradually stop occurring to us, because we no longer have a need to think of them. There are a bunch of studies linked in the description explaining the deep link between boredom and creativity, all of which confidently conclude that not only is boredom a beneficial state of being, it's a necessary one. Giving our brains breaks through boredom lets us recover without stimulation, something we need in order to recharge and function properly. It's when we're bored and understimulated that we're the most reflective, because with nothing but our own thoughts to occupy us, those thoughts are given the space that they need to be explored and understood. In one study in which 3 groups were tested on their creative problem solving after being exposed to different levels of boredom, it was the group that was the most bored beforehand that was most successful. I've personally had some of my best ideas and most insightful personal breakthroughs while going on walks, or showering, or cleaning, or doing the dishes, or working out, or anything else that's so mundane that it can be done without concentration, because my mind was free to wander of its own volition and just perceive the world around me and the thoughts within me. And I know that's been the case for a lot of people, and it terrifies me to think of how many wonderful things we wouldn't have if boredom had been cured and no one had the idea to make them. Video games, literature, movies, sports, cultural traditions, creative expressions. So many of the things that we love most were likely created because someone somewhere was bored and subsequently had an idea that they wouldn't have had otherwise. And that's why I cringe every single time someone celebrates how TikTok is curing boredom, because that is not a good thing, no matter how much it might seem like one. And I don't even like imagining what it's going to mean for the future of art and culture and innovation. Ultimately, I don't want this to be a pessimistic doomsday mentality, it's too late for art video, nor do I want it to be some high and mighty I'm better than you because I don't use TikTok and neither should you video. I don't think TikTok will kill the future of art altogether simply because I don't think enough of humanity will overuse it enough to lose their creativity or ability to educate themselves. And I don't think everyone who uses it gets brain rot and never needs to touch it again or else. Plenty of people have a good relationship with the platform that lets them enjoy the content they watch there while still maintaining balance in their life outside of it. And tons of gorgeous art has been created for TikTok, on TikTok, and based on the trends that originated there. TikTok itself isn't killing creativity, and there are tons of ways to use and engage with it that amplify that creativity rather than hindering it. What's killing creativity, in my opinion, is what's happening to our brains as a result of getting increasingly addicted to it. As more and more people become addicted to and dependent on TikTok, their willingness and even ability altogether to use it in moderation will continue to diminish. And without that moderation keeping those negative consequences in check, I do honestly believe that it presents a serious, legitimate risk to art and creativity as a whole. Because without moderation, TikTok eliminates the need for creativity, rather than inspiring it or empowering its users to express it. And that scares me, and I think it should scare you. Like anything though, TikTok is both good and bad. I'm not saying that no one should use it, nor am I trying to push a needlessly fear-mongering narrative that it's destroying humanity one TikTok brain at a time. Whether TikTok is good or bad depends entirely on how each user engages with it. And my point in making this video is just to bring attention to one of the most currently alarming consequences of engaging with it wrong, at least in my opinion. We have so little knowledge of what its constant use in excess will do to our brains, and what we're seeing of those consequences so far is not good. And they impact more aspects of our lives as both human beings and as artists than many people realize. So I guess, if nothing else, I just hope this video can at least promote its use in healthy moderation, with more thought given to how we're using it, not just on the social or community level, but on the neurological level too. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. Special thank you as always to channel members Joseph Solomon, TC Pratt, Zelda Deverak42, Haruki Saluzzo, King Good James, CP Lil Thing, Art of Amethyst Fable, Extinction Animation, and Andy the Hedgehog, as well as patrons Batman, Kyle Lowe, Blue Swanson, Cora Fear, Jamisha Walker, Alengshi, Kim Yin, Crazy Asar, Gentong, Grace Nick Xavier, Blah Mage, TC Pratt, Finn, Celine Merriman, Ash, Eldritchia, The Stray Dog, Allura, Greg Noble, Decagon, Jenny Chan, Cat Bus, Mac, Lucy Amajiki, Selena BB, Pride A, Totally Shogun, Insomniac Sleep Schedule, Ling Tang Wong, Marie Greer, Potato, and Jazz, and I'll see you in the next one.